Have you ever noticed how your life changes the moment you stop arguing with your own weakness? Not defeating it, not curing it, not becoming superhuman. Just stopping the negotiation. Because most people are not destroyed by one catastrophic decision. They are slowly dismantled by tiny negotiations repeated every day. 5 more minutes. Tomorrow instead. One last distraction. One more excuse. One more delay before becoming the person they keep imagining in private. And the terrifying part is this. Most people genuinely believe they are trying. But deep down, they are not building a life. They are managing their own avoidance. A person wakes up exhausted, scrolls through their phone in silence, promises themselves they will finally start changing today. Then the day disappears into distraction, hesitation, comfort, and emotional escape. At night, they feel frustrated again, not because they do not know what to do, but because they betrayed themselves again in small, invisible ways. And after enough repetition, something dangerous happens. The mind begins normalizing self-betrayal. You stop trusting your own words. Your goals start feeling emotionally distant. Discipline begins sounding unrealistic. And eventually, you quietly accept a weaker version of yourself as your permanent identity. This is where real suffering begins. Not when life becomes difficult, but when you realize you are participating in your own decline while pretending you are powerless to stop it. Tonight, we are going to explore why true self-mastery begins when you stop negotiating with your own weakness. Not through empty motivation, not through hustle culture fantasies, but through psychology, philosophy, behavioral conditioning, and the uncomfortable truth most adults spend years avoiding. Your weakness grows every time you treat your impulses like they deserve equal voting power over your future. And your transformation begins the moment you stop debating with the part of you that wants comfort at the cost of your life. Imagine a man sitting alone in his apartment at 2:17 a.m. The room glows blue from a laptop screen. Unfinished work sits open in front of him. A gym bag remains untouched in the corner. Messages unanswered. Goals delayed again. Outside the window, the city continues moving. Some people are building. Some are sleeping peacefully. Some are changing their lives slowly through consistency. But inside that apartment, another internal negotiation is happening. I'll start tomorrow. I just need motivation. I'm tired today. One more night won't matter. And maybe the saddest part is this. He believes himself. Because weakness rarely sounds destructive in the moment. It sounds reasonable. That is how self-sabotage survives for years. Not through dramatic collapse, through persuasive comfort. The philosopher Nietzsche once wrote that a human being is something that must be overcome. Most people interpret this poetically. But psychologically, it is painfully practical. Because inside every person exists a constant tension between two selves. The self that seeks growth, and the self that seeks comfort. The disciplined self wants long-term meaning. The weaker self wants immediate emotional relief. And modern life continuously feeds the weaker self. Instant entertainment, instant validation, instant distraction, instant dopamine. Human beings were never designed to resist endless stimulation every waking hour. So slowly, people lose their ability to tolerate discomfort. And discomfort is where transformation lives. Think about how many lives quietly collapse not because of tragedy, but because of avoidance. Avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding discipline, avoiding emotional honesty, avoiding responsibility, avoiding uncertainty. Avoiding failure, avoiding temporary pain. And every avoidance teaches the nervous system the same lesson. Escape discomfort immediately. This is why many adults feel trapped in cycles they cannot explain. Because the brain learns through repetition. Every time you escape discomfort, your mind strengthens the habit of surrender. Every time you keep promises to yourself, your mind strengthens self-respect. Your identity is not built through intentions. It is built through repeated behavioral evidence. A person who repeatedly quits begins believing they are incapable. A person who repeatedly follows through begins trusting themselves again. This is why self-mastery is not emotional. It is behavioral. Most people are waiting to feel ready before changing, but readiness is often created after action begins, not before. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius constantly wrote about resisting emotional indulgence and acting according to reason rather than impulse. Not because emotions are evil, but because impulses are temporary while consequences are lasting. And modern culture encourages constant emotional obedience. If you don't feel like it, don't do it. Protect your comfort, follow your mood. But moods are unstable narrators. Your future cannot survive if it is controlled entirely by temporary emotional weather. Real maturity begins when principles become stronger than impulses. This becomes especially visible in moments nobody sees. The alarm clock, the unfinished work, the lonely workout, the decision not to text someone toxic again, the decision to study while others waste hours escaping themselves online. These moments look small externally, but internally they are identity construction. Every decision quietly answers the same question. Which version of myself am I strengthening today? Most people imagine weakness as dramatic failure, but weakness is often passive. Passive distraction, passive procrastination, passive emotional dependence, passive avoidance, passive surrender. It slowly drains momentum from life like water leaking from a cracked container. And the terrifying part is that weakness adapts. The mind becomes incredibly skilled at creating intelligent excuses. I work better under pressure. I deserve rest. I'll become disciplined once life calms down. I'm just not naturally consistent. But often these explanations are simply emotional protection mechanisms. Because admitting the truth feels painful. And the truth is usually this. Many people are not lacking potential. They are lacking sustained confrontation with discomfort. Psychology calls this experiential avoidance. The tendency to avoid uncomfortable internal experiences even when avoidance damages long-term well-being. This explains countless behaviors. Scrolling instead of reflecting, escaping into entertainment instead of purpose, seeking validation instead of competence, waiting for confidence instead of practicing courage. Avoidance creates temporary relief, but long-term suffering. And the nervous system becomes addicted to short-term relief. This is why weakness grows silently. Not because people consciously choose destruction, but because comfort repeatedly feels emotionally safer than transformation. Imagine trying to build physical strength while avoiding resistance entirely. It would be impossible. The same applies psychologically. Mental resilience only develops through tolerated discomfort. There is no other path. No shortcut. No motivational trick, no perfectly optimized morning routine that removes struggle completely. Self-mastery requires friction. And this is where most people unconsciously negotiate with themselves. They want the rewards of discipline without the emotional cost of discipline. But discipline is expensive. It costs comfort, it costs convenience, it costs instant gratification, it costs emotional indulgence. And weakness always offers a cheaper emotional alternative. This is why people stay trapped for years inside cycles they secretly hate. Not because they are incapable, but because their daily negotiations keep reinforcing the weaker identity. Now here is the deeper psychological problem. Every time you negotiate with weakness successfully, your brain updates your self-image. You become someone who breaks promises to yourself. And eventually self-distrust develops. This is why many adults feel disconnected from their own potential. They no longer believe themselves. They say they will change, but internally their nervous system expects surrender. Because repeated self-betrayal destroys internal credibility. And rebuilding self-respect requires evidence, not affirmation. Evidence. Tiny, consistent proof that your actions and your words are becoming aligned again. This is why small, disciplined behaviors matter psychologically far more than people realize. Making your bed, finishing what you start, showing up consistently, keeping routines, doing difficult things without emotional drama. These behaviors rebuild identity slowly, like repairing cracks in a foundation one stone at a time. Carl Jung once said that people do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And weakness thrives in unconsciousness. Mindless habits, automatic distractions, emotional impulsivity, unquestioned routines. The moment you begin observing your own patterns honestly, transformation becomes possible. Because awareness interrupts automatic behavior. Imagine watching your own life like an outside observer. You begin noticing things. How often you escape discomfort. How often you delay meaningful work. How often you seek stimulation when silence appears. How often you negotiate against your own growth. And this observation can feel brutal at first, because it reveals something uncomfortable. Many people are not victims of circumstance nearly as often as they are victims of unchallenged patterns. This does not mean suffering is imaginary. Trauma exists, pain exists, mental exhaustion exists. But even wounded people eventually face the same question. Will I continue organizing my life around weakness or around growth? Because pain explains behavior, but it cannot permanently excuse self-destruction. And this realization is emotionally confronting. It forces responsibility back into your hands. Not blame, responsibility. There is a difference. Blame says, everything is my fault. Responsibility says, my future still depends on my choices. And responsibility is where power returns. Now let us explore 3 core frameworks that explain how people stop negotiating with weakness and begin building real self-mastery. The first framework is called identity through repetition. Most people think identity creates behavior, but behavior also creates identity. If you repeatedly avoid hard things, your brain builds the identity of someone who avoids difficulty. If you repeatedly confront discomfort, your brain builds evidence of resilience. Identity is not only something you think, it is something you practice. This means self-mastery begins not with grand transformation, but with repeated behavioral proof. You become disciplined by practicing discipline. You become courageous by practicing courage. You become reliable by practicing reliability. Not emotionally, practically. The second framework is emotional non-negotiation. Weakness survives through internal conversation. Maybe later, just this once, I deserve a break. But highly disciplined people often remove emotional debate entirely. They decide once, then act repeatedly. This reduces decision fatigue and emotional bargaining. The gym is not debated, the work is not debated, the boundary is not debated. Because every negotiation strengthens hesitation, and hesitation feeds weakness. This does not mean becoming robotic. It means refusing to let temporary emotions repeatedly override long-term values. The third framework is voluntary discomfort. Modern humans unconsciously structure life around convenience. But convenience weakens psychological endurance over time. Voluntary discomfort rebuilds resilience intentionally. Cold showers, difficult workouts, deep focus without distraction, honest conversations, sitting alone without stimulation, waking up early consistently. These experiences train the nervous system to tolerate discomfort without panic. And that changes everything. Because people who can tolerate discomfort gain extraordinary freedom. They stop being controlled by urges, by impulses, by emotional weather. And freedom from impulse is one of the highest forms of power. Now let us make this practical. How do you actually stop negotiating with weakness in daily life? Step 1. Identify your recurring negotiations. Write down the excuses you repeat most often. I'm too tired. I'll start next week. I need motivation first. I'm overwhelmed. Notice the patterns. Weakness usually speaks in repetition. The same excuses, the same emotional escapes, the same delays. Once visible, they lose some of their power. Step 2. Reduce emotional decision-making. Create systems that remove negotiation. Prepare clothes beforehand. Schedule workouts at fixed times. Block distracting apps. Create routines instead of relying on motivation. Motivation is unstable. Systems survive mood changes. Step 3. Rebuild self-trust through small promises. Do not begin with extreme transformation fantasies. Start small enough that consistency becomes possible. 10 minutes of reading, 1 completed task, 1 workout, 1 difficult conversation. Small victories rebuild internal credibility. And credibility matters more than intensity. Step 4. Practice discomfort intentionally. Not self-punishment training. Sit with boredom sometimes. Delay gratification intentionally. Do difficult things without immediate reward. Because emotional endurance must be trained like muscle. And modern life constantly weakens that muscle. Step 5. Separate feelings from commands. You are allowed to feel resistance without obeying it. This changes everything psychologically. You can feel lazy and still act, feel afraid and still move, feel uncertain and still continue. Emotions become information, not dictators. This is one of the clearest signs of maturity. The ability to act according to values instead of temporary internal states. Step 6. Stop worshipping comfort. Comfort is not evil. But comfort becomes dangerous when it becomes your highest priority. Because growth almost always feels uncomfortable before it feels rewarding. The gym hurts before strength appears. Discipline feels restrictive before freedom appears. Solitude feels uncomfortable before clarity appears. Transformation often feels worse before it feels better. And weakness exploits impatience. It whispers, "This discomfort means something is wrong." But often discomfort simply means growth is occurring. Imagine a sculptor standing before a block of stone. Every strike removes something unnecessary. The process looks destructive, but creation is happening. Your weaker habits are similar. They must be chipped away repeatedly, not hated, not feared, removed through repetition. One decision at a time. One boundary at a time. One disciplined action at a time. One moment of refusal at a time. And slowly, something remarkable begins happening. You trust yourself again. Your words regain weight. Your actions align with intention. Your mind becomes quieter because internal conflict decreases. You stop living as two separate people. The person who dreams and the person who avoids. Now both begin moving in the same direction. This is real self-mastery. Not perfection. Alignment. The alignment between your higher values and your repeated daily behavior. One day you may wake up and realize something subtle but life-changing. The things that once controlled you no longer have the same power. Distraction weakens, impulses soften, discipline feels less forced, consistency feels more natural. Not because life became easier, but because you became stronger. And strength is not loud. Real strength often looks quiet. Waking up when you said you would, keeping promises privately, walking away from destructive habits, continuing despite resistance, refusing to emotionally collapse every time discomfort appears. These moments rarely look cinematic, but they slowly build an extraordinary life. Because destiny is rarely shaped through dramatic breakthroughs alone. It is shaped through repeated ordinary decisions that strengthen character over time. And perhaps this is the deepest truth of adulthood. Your life changes when you stop asking weakness for permission to become who you already know you could be. Because weakness will never approve your transformation. It survives through delay. So eventually a decision must be made. not once. Will you continue negotiating with the part of yourself that wants comfort over growth? Or will you finally become loyal to the future you keep imagining in silence? Because self-mastery does not begin when weakness disappears. It begins when weakness stops controlling your decisions. And perhaps the most powerful realization of all is this: the strongest people are not those who never feel resistance. They are the people who stopped obeying it. If this resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Sometimes hearing another person's struggle reminds us that growth is rarely a straight line. And if you enjoy calm, psychology-driven reflections like this, you can subscribe for more.